Please welcome Shantal English Richards, yes, from JIPO.
So now that you're refreshed, let us talk about intellectual property. Some more about intellectual property, because I've heard a number of speakers speaking on intellectual property. All right. So I am from the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office, which is an agency of the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce. And we were established by the Jamaica Intellectual Property Act 2002. Now, what do we do at the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office? So we are responsible for administering all intellectual property laws. We conduct public education, so we go to schools and various seminars to present on all the areas of IP. We also register trademarks, designs, patents, geographical indications, and the voluntary deposit of copyright and related rights. And that would be our main focus this morning, copyright and related rights. And so what is intellectual property? So when we talk about intellectual property, it is the creation of the mind. And so everywhere in this room, there is some element of intellectual property. So the chair that you're sitting on is intellectual property because there is design rights in the chair. This microphone is patent because it's a technical solution to a problem. There was a time when we did not have microphones, and somebody thought about this idea and they put it into reality and into creation. We didn't have cordless microphones, and so we see the improvements. And so IP is everywhere. The fan that is blowing here, there is intellectual property in that, the patent. And for many of you, you would have a logo associated with your businesses or companies, and that is trademark. And so intellectual property greets you, it meets you when you go to sleep at night. Intellectual property greets you when you turn off that light switch, when you hit that bed that's designed. So we cannot do without intellectual property. It's all about creativity and your creation. It is everywhere. And even with all of our artists today, you know about your creation and your creativity. And so we're going to focus on two main areas of intellectual property this morning. Main focus would be copyright and also trademarks. So it's the creation of the mind. It's a legal right. It results from legal activities in the intellectual, scientific, industrial, literary, musical, and dramatic field. And these are some examples of intellectual property that I would have spoken to in a nutshell. And so intellectual property is divided into different areas. And so we have industrial property, which takes into consideration designs, patents, trademarks, geographical indications. And we have copyright and related rights, a standalone branch. And we also have traditional knowledge. So we're also talking about IP and music, and intellectual property rights provide the framework for protecting musical works, recordings, performances. The music industry is a dynamic landscape, constantly evolving. So with technology, the musical landscape is also evolving. And so it's very important for you to know what to do to ensure that you have safeguarded your intellectual property. Now, Alexander Kunt, the head of the creative economy sector at the World Intellectual Property Organization, states that the way artists create and share music has transformed significantly over the last century, largely because of the advancement in new technologies and the rise of new music genres. And so, with technology, we see a lot of changes in the music industry. So, what is copyright? So Section 6.1 of the Copyright Act of Jamaica states that it's a legal right which allows creators of your creative works to do anything with your work. So you have the right to reproduce your work, to distribute your work, to perform your work, to adapt your work, and by adapting your work, which is taking it from one format to another, and to communicate or to make your work available on demand to make your work available on the internet. And we also have related rights. Related rights, they resemble copyright, but they serve to protect a different interest. So they serve to protect the legal interests of certain persons and legal entities who contribute to making the work available to the public. And for example, dancers, singers, producers of sound recordings and broadcasting companies. And I see one of our general managers from our from one of the CMOs here today. So performers' rights, and he'll be talking about that. That's Mr. Mullins. And so some of the categories that copyright protects. So copyright protects the following: original. Let me stress the word original works. All right? Literary, dramatic, musical, and artistic works. That's the first category. And then we have sound recordings, films, cable programs, broadcasts, and the last category, typographical arrangements of published editions. So the work must be original. Qualifying for copyright protection. Copyright protection arises automatically. What does that mean? So if you woke this morning at 3 o'clock and you decide to write a poem, as at 3 o'clock this morning, you receive automatic protection. If you decide to write a song, you receive automatic protection. The law says that once you have your work in a tangible format, which is in writing or recorded, you receive automatic protection. And that is because of international treaties that Jamaica is a party to. For example, the Berne Convention for the Protection of Literary and Artistic Works, an 1886 convention. Okay. There is no formal requirement for registration by law, but I'm going to talk about that because, as I mentioned earlier, there's a voluntary copyright registration process. Again, your work must be in writing or recorded. And for copyrighted works, you would see it's important to have the formal notice. And the formal notice is the C in the circle, which is the copyright symbol, which is, and your name, then the date of creation, which is the notice to the world, to everyone, that you are the author and or the creator of the work in question. Now, what is a literary work? So I've identified a few works from the legislation just to point out to you what the law says. So a literary work is any work other than a dramatic or musical work which is written, spoken, or sung. So this would apply to many of you in here. And a musical work is a work consisting of music, exclusive of any words or actions, intended to be sung, spoken, or performed with music. So rhythm, scores, or other notation will be considered to be a musical work. Then we have sound recording, which is a recording of sounds from which sounds may be reproduced. Copyright protection. Copyright does not protect ideas, concepts, methods, and phrases. So, if you have a great idea, I encourage everyone to put your ideas on paper, write it down, record it, because it has to be expressed in a tangible way for you to receive protection by law. Having the idea alone is not your protection. Yes, it's very important to have the idea, but if you share your idea with someone else and that person takes that idea and decides to put it in a tangible format, the law recognizes the person who puts the idea in a tangible format. However, under copyright law, you cannot get any recourse. However, there may be rights under breach of confidence. So copyright protects the original expression of the idea. So we usually encourage persons at JIPO, put your ideas down. Nobody is your best friend when it comes on to a great idea, because once money is involved, there is no friendship, right? Everybody wants to get ahead, and so it's always critical to put your ideas in writing. The work shall not be eligible for protection unless it is in a tangible format. And as I said before, tangible means that it is in writing or recorded. Now, the copyright owner has two rights. So a copyright owner has a moral right and an economic right. The moral right is attached to the copyright owner, and it allows that person to be identified as the author of that work. So it's really a paternity right. It is my ownership to identify to that piece of work. Not to have your work treated in a derogatory manner, which means that someone use a part of your work or decide to take a part of your work and use it in a way that you did not intend. Or not to have a work falsely attributed to you as an author, as your work as the author of that work. Say you're in one genre and you do not support another, but you hear your work being used in another way that you would not have supported. And the right that everybody loves. Which right would you think that is? That deals with what? Money. Yeah, man, you got it right. The money. Everybody wants money. So you go into the business because you want to make profit. And so, right. So yes, you want to be recognized as the owner or the author of the work, but more so, you want the economic right that is associated with your intellectual property. And Section 9(1) of the Copyright Act of Jamaica states that the owner of the copyright in a work shall have the exclusive right to do or to authorize persons to do any of the following things. So as the owner of the work, you have the right to control the use of how your work is used, everything to do with your work. So you have the right to copy the work, issue the work to the public. You have the right to perform or show the work, to broadcast the work, to adapt the work, which means you're taking it from one format to another. For example, you write a book and you want to turn that book into a play. That's you taking your work from one format to another work. And you also have the right to make your work available on demand, which is to make your work available on the internet. So not because a person's work is on the internet, mean that it is free to use. Anybody can use it. Oh, it's online, so I saw it there, so I'm just going to use it. No, you'll have to get permission from the owner of the intellectual property, the copyright owner. So the term of protection for your work. So literary, musical, dramatic, artistic work is for the life of the author and 95 years after death. So that is our legislation. So what is the importance of the 95 years after death? This is because you can make allocation in your last will and testament to anyone you want, your family members, your friends, or any charitable organizations. You can make allocations in your last will and testament to them. Similar to your personal property, to your house and your car, you can leave your intellectual property to your relatives. And sound recordings, 95 years from the end of the year in which they were first made available to the public, and typographical arrangements, 50 years from the year in which the edition was first published. But for you, the main category would be the first two categories, life plus 95, and 95 years from the end of the year in which the works were made available to the public. Now, who owns the copyright in our work? So Section 22(1) of the Copyright Act of Jamaica states that, subject to the provisions of this section, the author of a protected work is the first owner in the work unless there is an agreement to the contrary, an agreement that states otherwise. And if it is that you breach or you infringe any person's copyright, again, the legislation, Section 31(1) of the Copyright Act of Jamaica states that you have a right to bring an action against anyone who, without a license, which is a permission to use your work, who does any acts that you were able to do as the copyright owner would have infringed on your intellectual property. So as I had mentioned before, the Section 9 rights, which is the right to copy the work, to issue the work to the public, to make an adaptation of the work, to broadcast the work, and to have the work available on demand or to have the work available on the internet. If anyone infringe on any of those rights, then you, as the copyright owner, can take legal actions against those persons who would have infringed on your intellectual property. And they can be fined and also be imprisoned. So it's serious business we're in. So don't take your creativity lightly. You are gifted, you're talented, and you have your intellectual property. And so we are urging you at the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office to ensure that you exercise your rights that you have, because you are the creators. And if persons infringe, take the necessary actions. There are exceptions to every rule. And so we have research or private study, criticism and review. So that's called fair dealing or reporting of current events. So a person is able to use copyrighted works for those purposes, but a limited amount of those works. So it would be, so a person may use your entire work and then go and say, oh, but you know, the law provides exceptions. That's not the case, because people always try to find a way around the law, right? And so the court will look at how to determine whether it falls within the remit or the ambit of fair dealing. So the court will look at the nature of the work in question, how much of the work was used, and the purpose for which the work was used, and the effect that it has upon the potential market and the commercial value of the work. Can I safeguard and earn from my work, which is what everybody wants to know? How can I make money? And the answer is yes, you can. And so because you know you can, you'll be excited. Lloyd spoke about it earlier, how you can earn. Christy spoke about how you can earn. So Nikki spoke about how you can earn. So yes, you can earn. And so once you know you can earn, you're happy and you're excited. And so I want to recommend that in Jamaica we have these collective management organizations. So we have the Jamaican Copyright Licensing Agency, that's JAMCOPY, and they license reproduction of text and image-based works. We have the Jamaica Music Society, licenses public performance of producers, and we have the general manager, Mr. Mullins, who is here, so you'll learn more about jams later. And we also have the Jamaica Association of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, which is JCAP, licensed public performances and reproduction rights of songwriters and music producers, music publishers. So how can I safeguard my copyright? So as I told you before, that the protection is automatic because of law. So there is one way, I'm not sure if you ever heard about the poor man's copyright. Yes, great. And so for the poor man's copyright, you put your work in an envelope. It's a self-addressed envelope. That self-addressed envelope, so it's sealed and it's sent by a registered post. When you get that envelope at your house, please keep it in a safe place and do not open it. Because if you open it, you defeat the purpose of doing the self-registration. But since we know that some persons will open it and will get themselves in trouble, in 2015 we have amended the copyright law, which provides for a voluntary deposit at the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office. So you would need to complete an application form, a declaration form, and deposit a copy of your work with the office. And when you do that, you receive a certificate. And that certificate is evidence that you have declared that you are the author and are the owner of the work in question. But remember, the certificate that you will receive from the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office is not to say, oh yes, you now have the copyright in the work. Because as I said before, copyright is automatic. So once your work is expressed in a tangible way, which is in writing or recorded, you receive automatic protection. By coming to JIPO or using the poor man's copyright, what you're doing is safeguarding your work, putting additional steps. So you have the evidence. Just in case someone says, no, it's my work, this one says, no, it's my work, you can say, here is my evidence that I have taken the necessary steps to safeguard my intellectual property. And some fees. So whilst it's voluntary to register at JIPO, the Legal Deposit Act of Jamaica states that every national publisher shall, within a month of publication, deposit a copy of your work, whether it's a document, whether it's a tape, whether it's a CD, to the National Library of Jamaica. Now, that is mandatory, and certainly you can be fined for not doing that. And you see where the National Library is. But again, I implore you to use the voluntary registration system because the fees are very minimal. So poems, lyrics, short story, 1 to 10. If you have 10 poems, 10 lyrics, it's 1,500 Jamaican dollars to do your voluntary deposit at JIPO. 11 to 50, 2,000, 51 to 100, 3,000. And if you have musical works or sound recordings, if you have 1 to 15, $2,000, and 2 to 40, 3,500. So it's very minimal. It's a very reasonable process. And so I implore everyone who is here this afternoon, who you have your intellectual property. Yes, it is automatic, but we are encouraging everyone to utilize the voluntary copyright registration service that we have so that you have that certificate as evidence that it is your copyright, as well as registering your trademark because it is your brand. It identifies you, the name of your business, your artist name. Register your trademark at the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office as well as your copyright. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm going to hand over to the moderator at this time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, too. We really appreciate your presentation. And already I see hands going up. All right, so you remember the rules. Short questions, especially since JIPO has a booth outside, so they're able to answer questions as well. So I saw the gentleman first, and then the lady. All right?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Dede Blocks. Suppose you use an email, right? Could you use an email record to prove copyright? No.
So there are two ways: the poor man's copyright, which is a registered mail, or the voluntary copyright register that we have at JIPO. So no emails, registered mail, and voluntary copyright registration service.
All right. And was there another question? I'm taking two, just two. Oh, sorry. Gentlemen, I'll be right back. Yes.
Hi, my name is Dave.
Hi, Dave.
All right. I just wanted to know what's the difference between JCAP and JAMS?
Okay, so as
because they are both mentioned as public performance organizations, so I just wanted to know.
Okay, so they are collective
Thank you.
management organizations. They imagine you are not able, as the owner of the intellectual property, you create your work. You don't have time to be managing all of your work. And so you would go to either JCAP or JAMS, which JCAP is the Jamaica Association of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, licensed musical or mechanical rights, and JAMS, producers' rights, focus on performers. So Mr. Mullins is here, and he will go more in depth on producers.
Yes. Thank you so much. Rights, yes. That's an excellent transition. All right, so one last question.
Pleasant afternoon.
Hi, afternoon.
I am Ricardo Suave, Jamaican recording artist, radio broadcast and sound system owner. My question to where exactly is JIPO? Some people don't know.
Okay, so we're at 18 Trafalgar Road, the first floor, at the Jampro building, the first floor, 18 Trafalgar Road.
My other question, what's the cost to trademark a brand?
Okay, so the first stage, 13,400, and then you have 17,700. So it's 2 stages. And remember, I see somebody open their mouth, right? It lasts for 10 years. So your trademark is protected for 10 years. So just divide that figure. So 13,700 and 17,700. So there are 2 steps to it, all right? So, and it lasts for 10 years. So look at that, it's profit for your money. Trust me. So register, contact JIPO 946-1300. I have a booth outside please visit. We're happy to answer all your questions. Thank you.